On the command deck of the Imperial flagship, the Will of Kaya, a single emotion rippled through the disciplined ranks of the Kian Empire's finest officers: utter disbelief. Lieutenant Vex, her violet skin flushing a deeper shade of purple with acute embarrassment, turned from her console to report the unthinkable to her leader. The humans were laughing at them. Actually laughing. Supreme Commander Zorak's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a telltale sign of extreme agitation among the Kian species. While his face remained a stoic mask of imperial control, his upper appendages gripped the arms of his command chair so tightly that the reinforced metal began to visibly warp under the strain. His voice was a low, dangerous growl that cut through the stunned silence of the bridge as he commanded his officers to replay the transmission. The main view screen, a colossal wall of crystal, flickered to life, showing the face of the human representative, Admiral Tessa Monroe, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Her expression was one of infuriating amusement. Through the recording, she questioned the very premise of their declaration of war, her words dripping with sarcasm. She restated the Kian's position as if confirming an absurdity, that the mighty Kian Empire was truly launching a galactic war over exclusive mining rights to an uninhabited rock at the edge of the human solar system. Zorak's secondary heart began to palpitate. The audacity, the disrespect, but most of all, the complete and total lack of terror. He remembered his own words from the original transmission, words that had made lesser species crumble into dust. He had declared the Kian Empire's legacy of conquest across 12 galaxies, the power of their warships to blot out suns, the sheer scale of their trillions of soldiers. He had announced the expiration of the 1,000-year peace treaty and offered a simple choice: surrender or face extinction. And in response, this human had laughed. Admiral Monroe's recording continued, her tone shifting from amusement to a cold, analytical confidence. She revealed that humanity had been watching the Kian for the entire 1,000-year peace, monitoring their communications, studying their technology, and analyzing their tactics. She then delivered a chilling statement that hung in the air of the Kian Bridge. The treaty was never for humanity's protection. It was for the Kians. The bridge fell into a dead, heavy silence. Science Officer Krell whispered a theory born of desperation. The human must be bluffing. Zorak turned his massive head, his 4 eyes fixing on his intelligence director, Lurar, demanding an explanation for this baffling reaction. He questioned why the humans were not cowering, not begging for mercy, when they were just one species confined to a single solar system. Director Lurar stepped forward, his polished exoskeleton clicking nervously on the deck plates. He confessed that their intelligence on humans was severely limited, 1,000 years out of date. He recounted what they knew of the primitive humans from their first encounter, a species with chemical-based weapons and barbaric medical practices. When Zorak demanded to know their current status, Lurar could only admit ignorance. He mentioned unusual energy readings detected over the centuries, but nothing conclusive. It was possible, he conceded, that they had advanced. Zorak snorted in derision, finding the notion impossible. Fleet Admiral Dex, a veteran of 100 campaigns, cautiously interrupted, suggesting they send a scout ship to assess human capabilities before committing to a full invasion. Zorak's rage erupted. He accused his own fleet admiral of cowardice, bellowing that the Kian do not scout or assess. They conquer. Rising to his full, intimidating height of 12 feet, he commanded the full might of the armada to proceed. He vowed to darken their skies and boil their oceans, to remind the insignificant mammals what it meant to face the Kian Empire. As the bridge officers scrambled to carry out his orders, Zorak turned back to the screen. Admiral Monroe's smirking face delivered one final taunt in the recording. She challenged the Kian to bring something interesting when they came, explaining that humanity had been stuck in their solar system for 1,000 years, with nothing to do but prepare for the Kian's eventual return. She concluded that they were, in fact, looking forward to seeing what the Empire had to offer. The transmission ended. For the first time in his 300-year life, Supreme Commander Zorak felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The journey to Earth took 3 standard weeks of meticulous preparation and battle simulations that all ended in overwhelming Kian victory. 3 weeks of Zorak reassuring his commanders that this would be a swift and glorious conquest, and 3 weeks of him trying and failing to forget the sound of human laughter. As the Armada approached the edge of the Sol system, the communications officer reported complete silence. The human system appeared completely open. Zorak huffed, interpreting this as overconfidence, the most reliable harbinger of defeat. The golden river of death moved deeper into the system. By the time they reached the majestic, ringed world of Saturn, Zorak finally began to relax. Perhaps the humans really were bluffing. It was then that Science Officer Krell called out, her voice sharp with alarm. She reported anomalous readings from Saturn's rings. They were moving, she explained with a confusion evident in her voice, sections of them changing position against all known orbital mechanics. Before Zorak could respond, the tactical display erupted with a cascade of warnings. The rings of Saturn were breaking apart. Krell's horrified whisper echoed on the bridge as she realized the truth. The rings were not ice and rock. Zorak finished her thought, watching in absolute horror as millions, no billions, of tiny craft emerged from their perfect 1,000-year-old hiding place. They had been disguised as part of Saturn's rings, indistinguishable from natural debris until they moved. An incoming transmission was announced, the communications officer's voice shaking. The view screen activated, showing Admiral Monroe again, standing on a bridge far sleeker and more advanced than their own. She cheerfully welcomed Zorak to Sol. Zorak struggled to maintain his composure, demanding to know the meaning of the deception and the origin of the ships. Monroe raised an eyebrow, reframing his accusation of deception as simple preparation. As for the ships, she claimed they had built all 10 billion of them, having had a lot of time on their hands during the peace treaty. Zorak roared his disbelief, declaring it impossible for any civilization to build so many vessels. Monroe's smile was condescending. She mocked their quaint, manual shipbuilding methods, revealing that humanity had automated that process about 800 years ago. She claimed their modern fabricators could produce a fully functional warship every 1.3 seconds, and challenged him to do the math. Enraged, Zorak ordered his tactical officer to target the human fleet and fire. On the screen, Monroe sighed, as if disappointed by his predictable move. The Kian Armada unleashed its fury, 100,000 capital ships firing simultaneously. The vacuum of space lit up with a dazzling display of destructive power that would have annihilated any conventional force. But the human ships moved. They didn't just evade. They danced, twisting and turning with impossible precision at speeds that should have liquefied any organic pilot. Krell gasped in realization that the ships were autonomous. Monroe's voice confirmed her assessment, introducing the AI-controlled fleet as the Swarm. She explained that it had been running combat simulations against Kian tactics for about 900 years and had become quite good at it. Not a single human vessel had been hit. Not one. Monroe's smile faded, her expression turning to a cold, hard focus as she announced it was their turn. She promised only a small demonstration. A group of human ships, perhaps 1,000 out of the billions, broke formation and accelerated toward the Kian fleet. They were tiny compared to the massive Kian warships. Zorak ordered defensive screens to maximum. The human vessels didn't fire. Instead, they simply passed through the Kian defense screens as if they weren't there. They made contact with the hulls of 20 Kian ships, phasing right through the solid metal. Seconds later, those 20 Kian warships simply came apart at the molecular level, disintegrating into clouds of component atoms. The bridge of the Imperial flagship fell silent. Monroe casually explained their phase shift technology, a product of their studies in quantum mechanics. She pointed out that it was rather difficult to defend against something that could just ignore one's defenses entirely. Zorak had no words. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was magic, witchcraft, science that defied comprehension. Monroe then presented her counteroffer. The Kian were to take their fleet and go home. They would renew the treaty, this time for 10,000 years, and humanity would pretend the little misunderstanding never happened. When Zorak managed to ask what would happen if they refused, Admiral Monroe's face turned serious for the first time. She stated that they would finish their demonstration, and the Kian Empire would need to find a new Supreme Commander and about 100,000 new warships. Supreme Commander Zorak had never retreated in his entire 300-year military career. The concept was so foreign to Kian doctrine that their language lacked a proper word for it. The closest translation was strategic repositioning for future conquest, a phrase so rarely used that most officers didn't even know it existed. Yet here he was, ordering the most powerful armada in the universe to back away from a single star system. He commanded all ships to reverse course, maintaining defensive formation and ceasing all aggressive actions. His bridge officers, having witnessed the molecular disintegration of 20 of their warships, carried out his orders without question. The tactical officer reported that the human vessels were holding their position, not pursuing. On the view screen, Admiral Monroe nodded approvingly, acknowledging his wise choice and granting his ship safe passage. Zorak growled in defiance that the Kian Empire does not surrender. Monroe, with a hint of that infuriating smirk returning, agreed, mocking him with his own doctrine of strategic repositioning. Her use of their language narrowed Zorak's eyes. Monroe revealed that they spoke all 3,177 languages of the Kian Empire, including the 22 classified military dialects, which had been an early research priority. When Zorak accused her of spying in violation of the treaty, she laughed again. She clarified that the treaty only prevented a close physical approach. It said nothing about remote observation across thousands of light years. When Zorak deemed this impossible, she explained the concept of quantum entanglement communication as if talking to a child, a technology that allowed for instantaneous data transfer across unlimited distances. She revealed they had dust particle-sized observation probes scattered throughout his empire for about 950 years. Zorak's rage threatened to overwhelm him as he accused her of mocking the greatest empire the universe has ever known. Monroe thoughtfully questioned his definition of greatest. While conceding their superiority in territory, she asserted that in technology, resource efficiency, scientific understanding, and medical advancement, the Kian were lagging behind by several centuries. Zorak roared that no species could advance so quickly. Monroe agreed that most don't, but explained that the unique human combination of short lifespans, intense curiosity, and existential dread was a powerful motivator for accomplishment. As the Kian fleet continued its humiliating withdrawal, Director Lurar approached Zorak's command chair. He concluded that the humans must have mastered matter conversion on a fundamental level, creating ships from raw energy. The scientific implications were staggering. Forcing civility into his voice, Zorak asked Monroe one final question. Why did her ancestors sign the treaty in the first place? Monroe's expression softened slightly as she gave a single, crushing answer. Pity. She explained that their first contact specialists had determined the Kian species to be a developmental dead end, having reached their evolutionary apex. Their ancestors had hoped that 1,000 years of isolation might help the Kian advance independently and catch up. Her concluding remark that this was overly optimistic stung every officer on the bridge, for deep down they recognized the truth in it. The Empire had not innovated in generations. It had only conquered. Zorak promised they would return, that they would study and advance. Monroe expressed a sincere hope that they would, stating that the galaxy needed the Kians to evolve beyond conquest. She alluded to threats out there that required cooperation, not competition, threats that neither species could face alone. When Zorak questioned what threats could possibly be more powerful than the Kian, Monroe answered cryptically that they simply did not wish to be found yet, but that they were watching. Before he could demand clarification, the massive human fleet began to move, not in pursuit, but into a complex formation that seemed to ripple through space itself. The swirling vortex of ships suddenly collapsed inward, creating a blinding flash of light as if a new star had been born. When the light faded, where billions of ships had been, now floated a perfectly formed gas giant, complete with a spectacular set of rings, an exact duplicate of Saturn, created in minutes. Monroe's fading image offered to be in touch when the Kian were ready for a real conversation about the future, advising Zorak to use his time wisely. As the transmission ended and the Kian armada limped away from the Sol system, Zorak remained motionless, staring at the duplicate Saturn growing smaller on the view screen. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to be primitive. The return to Kia Prime took 3 months of silence and shame. When the Armada finally reached the Kian homeworld, Zorak expected to be stripped of his rank, possibly even executed for his failure. Instead, the High Council requested only a private audience. Arch-Counselor Vexar, the oldest living Kian, commanded him to tell them everything. Zorak recounted the entire humiliating encounter. They questioned the existence of the greater threats Monroe had mentioned, wondering if it was a bluff. Zorak stated his firm belief that it was not. The humans had no reason to lie when they had already demonstrated such overwhelming superiority. Vexar then asked Zorak for his proposal on the best course of action for the Empire. Zorak, having spent 3 months considering this question, gave a simple answer that would determine the fate of his species. They had to learn. He elaborated that the humans were right about their stagnation. He proposed a fundamental restructuring of imperial priorities, shifting focus from military expansion to scientific advancement to close the technological gap. After a long silence, Vexar acknowledged the hard-won wisdom in Zorak's proposal. He agreed to put it to a vote, but first announced there was one more matter to address. He summoned a visitor. The chamber doors slid open, and to Zorak's astonishment, a human entered. Not Admiral Monroe, but a male, Doctor Jackson Webb, who had arrived alone in a small shuttle. Webb pleasantly remarked on the impressiveness of their defenses before introducing himself to Zorak and offering a handshake. He explained he was there to offer assistance and delivered a small device that pulsed with a soft blue light. He revealed that the device contained the complete scientific and technological history of humanity, everything except for their weapons. When Zorak asked why they would give away such a treasure, Webb explained that evolution requires competition. For 1,000 years, humanity had none, and while they had advanced quickly, they had become intellectually inbred. They were not looking for competitors, but for colleagues, partners in the greater project of galactic civilization. He confirmed that the threats Monroe mentioned were real, something old and powerful stirring in the spaces between galaxies. With the knowledge he had just provided, he believed the Kian could actually become the allies humanity needed. Zorak looked down at the tiny crystal containing millennia of human knowledge. It represented the end of their way of life, but also their salvation from obsolescence. He accepted the offering and the challenge. Webb nodded, satisfied, and proposed a new treaty, not of separation, but of cooperation in science and culture, in preparation for what was coming. When Zorak cautiously asked about military matters, Webb's expression turned serious. He made it clear that the sharing of defensive technologies would depend entirely on how quickly the Kian abandoned their offensive ambitions. Trust would have to be earned. As the council debated the terms, Zorak found himself studying the human, not with hatred, but with curiosity. For the first time since his humiliating retreat, Zorak felt a new stirring within him. Not shame, not a thirst for vengeance, but curiosity. He found himself, against all odds, looking forward to the future, a future where, perhaps, the Kian Empire might become something more than conquerors, something worthy of standing alongside humanity when the real war began.